We'll have a little transition moment. Please turn to the person next to you and say, I'm really glad I'm sitting next to you. Now turn to the person on the other side and say, actually, I'm really happy I'm sitting next to you instead. Now turn back to the first person and say, I really did mean it when I said it to the other person. You know me. Adam, are we good? So I wanted to go last because I know that my mom and Jacob and Nick would cover all the things. And I said a lot of things when we celebrated my parents' birthday for their 60th and 70th. So I got some behind-the-scenes story of Noah Yates, which you don't really know. So I'm going to tell some of those stories. Can you hear me now? There we go. You're good? Is Megan available? Is there a video that was supposed to play? Very special video. Not as good as Nick's video or slides. All right, we'll get going. So 2 weekends ago on a Saturday, I got a call from my mom telling me that my dad had died. And fortunately, this was a very soft landing for us. It was not a surprise. It was not the gut-wrenching suddenness that it could happen. And we were in the middle of our block party, which in our community is a big deal. We get a block party once a year, and they shut down the street. And on our block, we have a neighbor named Charles who grills for everybody. Everybody tosses him some money, and he grills burgers and ribs. And this guy competes in rib fests and wins. And Charles is a force. And if you ask, like, does Charles play football? The answer would be, duh. Charles is a big guy, and he's got this secret sauce that makes everything so good. And one year I asked him, I said, man, Charles, like, your ribs are so good. Like, what is it about that secret sauce? Like, tell me the secret of your secret sauce. He said, Alex, the secret to my sauce is the secret to anything that's worthwhile. And the secret is time. You put the time into it, and the flavor is going to come out. And I was talking to Nick that day, and the one thing that he said when he was going through all the letters from my dad's 60th birthday was how everybody commented about the time that my dad put into him. And so my dad really earned a lot of trust because the foundation of any relationship is built on trust. And if you know the speaker, Brene Brown, she says you earn trust, you can't buy trust. And my dad earned very good relationships with everybody. And it's the foundation for all those relationships. And for my dad, his secret sauce was time. So my dad was all about shared purpose. That's true. My dad had a strong sense of purpose. He wanted to do fun things with his family, and he was all about fun. The contradiction with that is that my dad was a very straight-laced, by-the-book kind of guy. And when I was here at Christmas time, I was having lunch with a bunch of parents that my friends have been having meals with for the past 40 years. And I said, yeah, my dad always was about the fun. Thanks for all the fun I was having. And one of the dads said, well, your dad didn't bring the fun. He brought us together. We brought the fun. And the one thing I want to compliment all the people that were in my life growing up is that my dad brought people together in a community. And I learned how to be a dad from all the dads. And I got to compare my dad harshly against the buffet of dad characteristics that were out there. I'm not going to name the names because I'll forget people and then people get upset. I'm just going to say that there's a lot of great dad qualities that I was happy to cherry pick. And same with the moms. I learned from all the other moms that I had. And I had all these other siblings that were out there. And I got to benefit and learn from all the different family dynamics. And then I would, of course, unfairly judge, like, well, we don't have those family dynamics like those other people, or we don't have that like these other folks, as every kid does. But I got to see a great representation of families and what family was about. And I was so grateful to have that community that he had built for all of us. And so I was so grateful for all of that. So learning from my dad, where he is having engraved on his tombstone, where he said, thanks for all the fun, on behalf of all of us, you're welcome. So we came together for shared purpose, and a lot of that was us in the room was either scouting or perhaps church. And shared experiences is really what bonds people. And nothing was more interesting than my wife and I watching the shared experience of our families meet. And my wife is here, and her dad sadly passed away years ago from a heart attack. But when our dads meet, it was a great dad moment. My dad used to caravan a whole bunch of friends up to Temecula to Texas Lills. And Sharon's parents were in town visiting, and we were staying in Palm Springs at a timeshare, and my dad said, well, why don't we split the difference of driving, and we'll meet at Texas Lills. What my parents did not know is that it was under new management. And Texas Lil was not the steakhouse that he thought it was. It had turned into some like cowboy Hooters version of a steakhouse. Much to my dad's shock. And Sharon's dad walks in, he's like, is this what he picked out? I like this guy, this is great. And as I'm sitting and watching the waitress in between my dad and her dad, and she's got a red cowboy hat on and a little white halter top on and her little cowboy boots, and I tried to slyly sneak a picture of her, and she's like, did you try to take my picture? I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. She goes, well, you gotta let me smile. And she put her arms around her dad's, and our dad just sat there with these big dumb grins on their face, like, this is so great. Our parents hit it off pretty well. So having a connection with shared experiences, sometimes it's just breaking bread at a steakhouse like Texas Lil's. Can I have my son and daughter, Kaylin and Sienna, come up, please? Sienna, you stand over here. For this reenactment, Sienna is going to be grandma, and for this, Kaylin is going to be his grandfather. You're going to stand on the other side. You stand here. 1 year in the 2000s, I bought my mom a big vase of roses, and I walked in the house, and my mom said, roses? No one ever gives me roses. Roses are my favorite. And my dad was in the other room reading the newspaper. What? What did you say? I placed my vase of red roses right in the middle of the table next to my dad's little vase of carnations. Roses are my favorite. No one ever gives me low roses. I just love roses. When dating, you said that carnations were your favorite. But honey, we didn't have very much money, and that's what you bought me, so I said that they were my favorite. But we've been married for 40 years. I said, Dad, Mom saved you lots of money. Just enjoy it. Take on. Thank you very much. Hey, take it with you. I love that story so much. Let me just say, if you're in a relationship, trust but verify. Nick showed a picture of me and my brothers wearing holding up some shirts that said favorite son, and the story behind that is this. But before I tell that story, I'm going to go Bill Cosby. Well, not that Bill Cosby. I'm going to tell Bill Cosby. I tell a story before I tell a story. And that story is about the Windy City. And apparently when you get married, your wedding vows are legally binding. So as soon as we got married, my wife got a job and took us to Chicago. And we've been there for 16 years, and it's been surprisingly great. And in Chicago, people talk about how cold it is, and they said, oh yeah, that wind there in that windy city. Well, the truth about that story is that back when there was a World Expo, Chicago and New York were fighting over who was going to get that World Expo. And a reporter from New York was trying to take Chicago down a peg, and he just said that all their boasting was just Chicago being a windy city, being a windbag. It has nothing to do with the weather. It can be windy, but that's not the reason why. So Chicago just owned it, and they said, we are taking ownership of this. You can't insult us. We're just going to own it, and we're going to live it. And that's what they did. They owned their reputation. Likewise, my reputation as the favorite son is similar to the Windy City. In the early 2000s, my parents did a few cross-country trips, and they would plan out all their itineraries, and they would book all these Airbnbs and motels. And one time they were getting towards Indiana, and I said, I wonder how they're doing, because they started late, and they were going to be dragging across the Midwest. And I called this Airbnb in Indiana, and I said, hi, has Noah and Nancy checked in yet? He goes, no, it's midnight here, and we expect them, but we just don't know where they're going to be. I said, okay, well, just tell them that their favorite son called. He goes, Do you want to leave a name? Nope. Just tell them their favorite son called. And the next day, Nick got a phone call. Jacob got a phone call. Still waiting on that phone call. So that Christmas, every present was to Dad from your favorite son, guess who? To Mom from your favorite son, guess who? And then I bought shirts, made a whole thing of it, to the point where my parents had to defend themselves and write letters to all of us saying, well, you're my favorite son for this reason, you're my favorite son for this. Anyway, I got my letter, I'm keeping it. I got my reputation. One of my last stories, I'll invite my wife up here in just a second. But my dad was very traditional in the sense when it came to holidays. He loved Thanksgiving. He loved to cook a turkey. So while my mom would bake one inside, he would grill one outside. And he would love to have all the trimmings, and he loved the gravy, and he was all about the traditional Thanksgiving stuff. So Thanksgiving was a big deal that my parents hosted, and Christmas was like second to none. He loved it. I don't want to say it's because our birthdays are all in December, but like he really lived for the holidays of like having those wonderful surprises. He would buy these big boxes, and he would stuff them full of surprises. And the first year, when Jacob and I were young, he had this huge 10-foot long box, and it was fishing poles. And the next year, there's a huge long box, and it was filled with hockey sticks, which I don't know how you're going to play hockey in San Diego, but we got a hockey stick. The next year, it was bows, and then, you know, a whole bunch of Nerf balls. And anyway, every year, there'd always be this big surprise, and my dad loved to make sure that Christmas was really special for us. And I had to warn my now wife when she would come over because my parents, you know, were raised Catholic, and they celebrated Advent. And my parents, after they would say grace, they would hold hands and sing Joy to the World. And so I would tell them and say, you got to be prepared that we're going to hold hands and sing the song. And they're like, for real? Like, we're going to sing? Like, and they're like, well, which version? Is it the Jeremiah was a bullfrog, was a good friend? No, we're singing Joy to the World. So anyway, Jeremiah had a bullfrog is now a special place of folklore in the Yates family. But the last story I want to share, I want to invite my wife to come on up, because for the very first Thanksgiving, I said, Dad, is there anything we could bring? And he says, no, we're fine. And I said, well, can we bring like a pie or something? And he goes, no, we're fine. I said, but Sharon makes the best pies. You really need to have a pie from Sharon. And with that, let me introduce Sharon Dewar to tell her version of the story.
So I've never cooked a pie in my life. And Alex is very much like the Windy City we moved to, boasting all the time. Let me also premise that this was very new, going to Thanksgiving dinner at Alex's family's holiday. We were not married yet. We were not engaged yet. This is a big deal. I needed to make a good impression. He just told his dad, who loves pie, makes a big deal about getting a very special pie, that I will cook the best pie. Never cooked a pie in my life. And he just went into what kind of pie did he want? Not just an apple pie. It was?
Dutch apple pie.
Okay, I don't know what that is. So now I'm stressing out. I have to get a recipe. I've got to get it right. And Alex, very much like his dad, social, wanting to bring people together, says the day before Thanksgiving, but this is the day we go and get everyone together. We need to go organize a big party, and we're the center of it. So instead of being at home baking a pie I've never baked in my life and have to get it right for Thanksgiving dinner for my hopefully future father, he takes me out and just says, don't worry about it, we'll be fine. We get back to my apartment after midnight, and here I am peeling apples, cutting things up. He, meanwhile, falls asleep on the couch, says, don't worry about it. Eventually, I'm exhausted. The pie is in the oven. And at some point, I close my eyes for just a second. And we wake up to not the fire alarm, but burning pies. And anyway, Alex was not at help at all. The next morning, I had to get up at the crack of dawn to cook this pie. And I did, and all I want to say about my father is he is so gracious, because it had to have been the worst pie he's ever eaten in his life.
And he said, it's the best pie. And I said, see, I told you. In closing, my father was a storyteller. I don't know where we got it from. There's a saying that the most important stories we tell are the stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves. And my dad's story was about bravely bringing people together. And I'm so happy to see all of you here. And the advice that he gave to me on our wedding day was the advice for all of you. And that is, take care of each other first, and everything else will take care of itself. Thanks for being here.